Welcome back to the Galtor Campaign. This is going into Phase 3 of the campaign at this point, so once again here's the order of battle for everybody to get an idea of what units were involved and what kind of state they were in. So with House Davion, their unit of the 4th Crucis Lancers with their CO Major General Charles Duncan, their regimental battle group being located on the Wagnall Plain on the left flank. Louis Philippe's battalion, the same location with Alexander's battalion and Lebrun's battalion, all on the Wagnall Plain left flank. Then we have the Bremen Draconis March Militia, with their CO Lieutenant General Mary Tolman, regimental battle group, also located on the Wagnall Plain's left flank. They sit at 45% losses for Jenkins' battalion, Spassel's battalion at 10% losses, and then Marty's battalion. Next up is the Clovis Draconis March Militia, with their CO Major General Clement VIII, regimental battle group, in the centre of the Wagnall Plain, backed up by Rimmel's battalion, Ellsworth's battalion and Darlington's battalion. The Robinson Draconis March Militia with their general V.E. Fuchs, located on the right flank outside New Derry, with Preminger's battalion, Schneider's battalion and Schubert's battalion. The Dahar Draconis March Militia, with their CO General Sir William Dobson, his regimental battle group was destroyed previously. This leaves Pope's battalion in New Derry with 33% losses, and Sumner's battalion with 76% losses in New Derry, while French's battalion was also destroyed. Finally, we have the Galtor Irregulars, with the Marquis of Ormond's battalion in New Wuhan City at 75% losses. The New Derry Civil Defence Forces, also naturally located in New Derry with 80% losses, and General Liao Yao Xiang's brigade, which has at this point been destroyed, leaving the Lone Wolves at 40% losses, also stationed in New Derry. House Kurita, on the other hand, aren't looking as great either. The 2nd Galadon Regulars with their CO General Lavrenti Kornilov, their regimental battle group and their overlord dropship Dostoevsky were in orbit, alongside Kutuzov's battalion, Georgi's battalion and Ehrenberg's also in orbit. The 8th Galadon Regulars with their CO Brigadier General Victor Nicholas, the regimental battle group in New Derry, de Montcalm's battalion in New Derry with 35% losses, Morgan's battalion with 25% losses in New Derry, and Gates's battalion with 15% losses based in New Derry. And the 2nd Amphigean Light Assault, with their Brigadier General Karl Gramanov as their CO, with their regimental battle group, Ophiuchus's battalion, Pollock's battalion, and Themistocles' battalion, all located on the Wagnall Plain. This basically represents the final group of units assigned to the battle, and coming into the final conflict here of the Galtor campaign. Phase 3. No one expected the Galtor campaign to enter a 3rd phase. By all rights, the Federated Sons had won a marginal victory. They'd survived the Draconis Combine assault, caused grievous casualties, and broken through the planetary blockade. By early harvest, both sides fielded roughly equal forces, and the strategic situation began to stabilise. According to personal letters, mech warriors on both sides seemed to be certain of a quick and decisive end to hostilities. When the Robinson and Clovis Draconis March militia regiments arrived, General Andrew Cunningham, district commander of Draconis March, took command of the Davion forces on Galtor 3. Margrave Sheridan Douglas and the survivors of the 12th Vegan Rangers Alpha Regiment rotated out to Verde. Although Cunningham had proven himself an able administrator, he had no experience directing a full-scale campaign. In fact, his combat experience consisted of only a short stay with the Air Lancers of the 1st Davion Guards. His quiet and dignified style of command also came as a great change to the brash, foul-mouthed, cigar-smoking Margrave Douglas. Cunningham further distanced himself from Douglas's image by landing on Galtor 3 without his personal battle mech. He directed the entire campaign from inside a mobile HQ. Cunningham's first priority was the relief of New Derry. In the smoking remains of the city, the Dahar March militia and the remains of many native units were subsisting on the meagre supplies snuck in by internment dropships. General Samsonov had kept a death grip on the city. It wouldn't be easy to relieve New Derry. Technically, the city lay thousands of miles behind enemy lines. The Kuritan front stretched from Changli in the south to the middleway pass to New Wuhan City. Furthermore, 7 Draconis Combine regiments faced 4 Davion regiments, one of which was under strength, unsupplied, and surrounded. Yet, the Draconis Combine generals realised that they teetered on the brink of disaster. Stretched over thousands of miles, the Kuritan forces were weak everywhere. Compressed into a powerful 3-regiment force, the Davion troops could strike anywhere on the continent and overwhelm any single position. it became General Samsonov's first priority to retreat and consolidate his troops. In a bold move, Kuritan dropships landed in the narrow Changli Pass and quickly embarked the 6th Benjamin Regulars. That same night, 2 Kurita regiments retreated from New Wuhan City, while another column wound through the bottleneck of the Middleway Pass. By morning, 5 regiments were east of the mountain passes, and 1 orbited the planet. General Samsonov had completed a masterful withdrawal. District Commander Cunningham moved quickly upon hearing of the Kurita retreat. The Robinson and Bremen DMM regiments immediately struck the Kurita battalion left in the Middleway Pass. The Draconians stood their ground, and the 2 regiments exhausted themselves clearing the pass. The Clovis DMM rushed forward to liberate New Wuhan City, while 1 battalion dropped into Wuhan Pass. After 5 hours of harsh mountain fighting, the Draconians repulsed the attack and frustrated Cunningham's attempt to cut the Kurita forces off from their main base. Success here allowed the Draconis Combine to rotate out their understrength units. General Yoriyoshi quickly gathered up the survivors of the hard-hit 17th Benjamin Regulars for immediate liftoff. The dropships never came though. Instead, Samsonov selected his own 5th Galadon Regulars for the first liftoff. However, the Warlord and his HQ unit remained on the planet. Then, Samsonov explained to Yoriyoshi the contract for the 1st Amphigean group stipulated that they be rotated off-planet next. By this time, Yoriyoshi smelled a rat. His depleted regiment was to be ground into nothing. It particularly stung then that Samsonov allowed a mercenary unit to rotate out before a loyal House regiment. As the Kurita line contracted, pressure grew on New Derry. Daily bombing and strafing runs pounded the city. Kurita would hope that local air superiority cut off even the hope of resupply and reinforcement. Once again, the mech warriors inside New Derry faced isolation. Fall of New Derry. The final hours for New Derry came unexpectedly. Kurita's spies within the besieged city discovered a large drainage tunnel, uncovered in the previous week's bombing, and it ran underneath a strong Davion position and into the heart of the city. It was a perfect attack route. Early the next morning, dropships entered the lower atmosphere and dropped thousands of small incendiaries. The city exploded into flame, and the temperature rose drastically. Whole streets became sheets of fire, trapping mech warrior and citizen alike. Without a moment's hesitation, General Samsonov ordered the 2nd Amphigean Group and the 8th Galadon Regulars into the conflagration. The Amphigeans exited the sewer tunnel in the middle of the city and blasted everything in their path, rushing headlong toward Elliot Park, still the current HQ for Sir William Dobson. There, a ragtag collection of spent Davion units waited for them. When the first scout mechs of Pollux's battalion, 2nd Amphigean, registered on radar, Sir Dobson held his fire. He now occupied a captured Awesome, whose leg actuators were frozen in mid-stride. Right beside the scouts, Pollux's assault mechs lumbered into range. Still, Sir Dobson waited patiently. The smoke and rubble effectively hid his scattered units. Finally, Lieutenant Colonel Pollux's own dull orange Thunderbolt emerged from a smoking building. Sir Dobson swung round all 3 Kreuz particle cannons of his Awesome and blasted the battlemech. All along the line, Davion battlemechs, many immobilized or stripped of armor, loosed a holocaust of fire and explosion against Pollux's assault company. Discipline collapsed under the furious attack, and the company fled. Other companies, however, didn't crack. They calmly called for aerospace fighter support and made short work of the Davion defenders. The Amphigeans followed up the airstrike with a concentrated attack on Dobson's laser-streaked battlemech. He refused to leave the vehicle even after his main particle cannon jammed. Dobson withstood blast after blast, until finally, his machine exploded. Throughout the day, the Davion forces continued to resist. However, the firestorm and lack of central command shattered an already fragile defense. At dusk, small groups of defenders drifted out of the city toward the Davion line. Only a few would make it. The Lone Wolves surprised everyone by uncovering 3 dropships carefully hidden near the airbase. Cramming on as many mechs as possible, the dropships roared through the Kurita blockade, guns blazing at everything that moved. The abrupt Lone Wolf departure left the airbase intact for the Draconians. The 8th Galadon Regulars seized thousands of gallons of aviation fluid, coolant and lubricant. Electronic equipment, navigation gear and other spare parts also fell into their hands. Sporadic sniping would continue during the night as the Amphigeans eliminated pockets of resistance, and soon a deathly quiet fell over the smouldering rubble. Prince Davion resurgent. Perhaps the fall of New Derry jarred something inside Prince Davion. 2 days after the fall, he shook off the cloak of despair and disinterest and began acting like a leader. He immediately opened diplomatic negotiations with Kurita, reactivated the command circuit to Galtor 3, and sent 2 guards regiments there. Takashi Kurita reacted too, instantly ordering 2 Sword of Light regiments to reinforce the planet. Actually, Prince Davion never intended to waste his 2 best regiments in an escalating border incident. As his letters clearly show, Hansa Davion knew Takashi Kurita well enough to realise that the Coordinator would lose enormous face by simply retreating off planet. It would be a different story, however, if Takashi could claim that Davion warmongering had gotten out of hand and his interests lay in peaceful, diplomatic efforts. Meanwhile, the Galtor campaign ground to a halt, both sides staring at each other across the Wagnall plain, too exhausted to fight. Kurita and Davion diplomats met in a small town in between the 2 forces. The first accomplishment came quickly. In 2 weeks' time, a ceasefire would be declared. Traitor. Nothing worries a mech warrior more than the talk of peace. Invariably, preliminary peace talks set a date for armistice, and both sides increase hostilities to gain the best field position before the diplomats meet at the bargaining table. Such logic prevailed on Galtor 3. The moment the diplomats set the armistice date, the front erupted in a blaze of laser light. Air lances fought twisting battles high above the struggling, ground-crushing titans below. The small town where the talks were held ceased to exist. Cunningham developed a beautiful plan to pin the Kuritan forces against New Derry. General Samsonov hoped to lay a trap that would crush 2 battalions. However, General Yoriyoshi outmaneuvered everyone. Humiliated by his defeat at the Star League storehouse, angered by the refusal of General Samsonov to pull out his regiment, and unable to contact Takashi Kurita, Yoriyoshi conceived a brilliant plan to crush the Galadon military power on Galtor 3. 2 regiments of the Benjamin Regulars, the Shattered 17th and the Green 6th, guarded the right flank of the Kuritan position. In the centre lay the 2nd Amphigean Group. On the left, Nicholas's hard-fighting 8th Galadon Regulars would hold New Derry. A new Galadon force, the 2nd Galadon Regulars, floated above the battlefield as an orbital reserve. The Benjamin District Commander correctly guessed Andrew Cunningham's intentions. He knew that the 4th Crucis Lancers, now floating overhead, would be used to flank the city. Yoriyoshi conferred with General Samsonov and placed in him the seed of a trap. The Benjamin Regulars would lift off into orbit, and when the Davion units attacked, they would drop behind the 2 lead regiments. At the same time, the Amphigeans would strike the attackers in the flank, and the 2nd Galadon Regulars would drop on top of the lead regiments. As planned, Yoriyoshi secretly withdrew almost his entire force into the dropships under his command. Barely 1 mech in 20 would stay behind. All radio traffic was forbidden, except for the chatter deliberately created by Yoriyoshi's text to fool the Davion district commander. When the date of armistice arrived, Yoriyoshi gave his orders. However, they were not the orders anyone expected. The dropships turned around and left the system for the Galtor jump point. As the Davion forces poured through the non-existent left flank, the Benjamin Regulars dwindled to a dot on a radar screen in front of General Samsonov's disbelieving eyes. Disaster. District Commander Cunningham didn't believe it either. The Bremen DMM assigned to smash through the Benjamin Regulars found only empty ground. To their right, the 4th Crucis Lancers reported the same eerie silence. The 2nd Galadon Regulars dropped as planned. Without a force to the flank of the Crucis and Clovis regiments, however, the 1st Assault Battalion was pummeled. The 2nd Battalion dropped wide and retreated towards Samsonov's HQ. Before it dropped, though, the 3rd Battalion received the order to abort. The 2nd Amphigean Group didn't fare much better. Brigadier General Karl Gramanov struck the flank of the 4th Crucis Lancers only to then themselves be flanked by the 4th Clovis Regiment. The Clovis DMM and the 4th Crucis Lancers bottled up the Amphigeans and began destroying them mech by mech. The Bremen Regiment raced behind the crumbling Kurita line straight for General Samsonov's HQ. If General Tolman could destroy the dropship station there, 2.5 regiments would be trapped on the ground. General Samsonov's HQ guard consisted of a single battalion from the 2nd Galadon Regulars and some non-mech support units. He personally positioned this force in a river valley barely 10 miles from his HQ, with no reinforcements. He would order the Amphigeans and the 8th Galadon regulars, fighting the Robinson DMM, to withdraw toward New Derry to await transport off-world. Overcome with confidence, General Tolman recklessly flung her command against the Kuritan line. The brave young men and women of the 2nd Galadon easily repulsed this hasty attack. Colonel Tyr Georgi leaped from fire position to fire position in his steel-grey cicada, directing the efforts of his troops. On other fronts, Kurita commanders fought against the panic that seized their men. Though trapped by the 4th Crucis Lancers and the Clovis Regiment, Gramanov saved his Amphigeans from total destruction by punching a hole through the Davion line and rendezvousing with their dropships near New Derry. The ruins of New Derry gave the 8th Galadon perfect cover for a withdrawal. By afternoon, the first Kurita dropships would lift off. The Bremen DMM, reinforced with Simon's battalion of the 4th Crucis Lancers, pressed hard on the dwindling Kuritan defenders, but the Draconians held back the Davion tidal wave. Lieutenant General Tolman acted fast. She brought her bright red and yellow thunderbolt to the crest of an exposed hill and pointed at the plumes of black smoke floating on the horizon. "Mech warriors," she cried. "There is the Kurita camp. They are burning your spoils, denying your rights. Will you let them win?" Emboldened by her words, the Davion forces pushed forward. The Draconians gave ground, and soon the defence would fall apart. However, one section of the front stood its ground. General Samsonov's personal assault lance stood in a circle and blasted every Davion mech foolish enough to get in range. The General's own red and green Atlas poured out streams of death from its lasers and AC-20. This lance alone almost stopped the Davion attack. A dozen Davion mechs lay burning around the giant assault vehicles. However, Samsonov didn't want to die during a glorious, honourable death. During a lull in the shooting, a Leopard-class dropship landed near the General, boarded his Atlas and one other surviving mech and took off. The few remaining Kuritan mechs would surrender. District Commander Cunningham wouldn't believe that the Draconians were ripe for destruction. The more it seemed like a Davion-crushing victory, the more he worried. Therefore, when the first scouts reported that they were within visual range of the Kuritan base, Cunningham ordered all advance stop. Although Lieutenant General Tolman and the other commanders protested, Cunningham stood firm. For 8 hours, while Kurita dropships lifted off one after another, the Davion forces simply waited, just out of artillery range. The campaign was over. Aftermath. Surprisingly, General Yoriyoshi lived after his betrayal on Galtor 3. Takashi Kurita didn't want to lose a commander who fought so well. After a session with the Assembly of the Grand Inquisitor, Yoriyoshi transferred to the court in Luthien, accompanied by his entire family. District Commander Cunningham returned to the central government. Hansa Davion apparently considered him more effective as an administrator in some less active area. General Samsonov still reigns as warlord of the Galadon military district. After the battle, he offered to commit seppuku for his failure to destroy the enemy. In a great show of compassion, the coordinator would stay his hand. The event was broadcast to 1,000 planets across the galaxy. Margrave Sheridan Douglas once again refused to commission in the regular army. His heroic exploits on Galtor were widely serialized in video and print media. Galtor 3 still rests uneasily on the border of a hostile nation. Its people suffered greatly during the war, but they're rebuilding their world, even as this is written. We on Galtor 3 salute the Federated Sons for their commitment to freedom, and we honour the blood spilt on our world. One day we hope to repay the cost of freedom by making Galtor 3 the breadbasket of the Federated Sons. And that about wraps up the Galtor campaign in as much as the events that happened through the 3 distinct phases of the battle. And what a battle! And honestly, Galtor as a book is one of the best that was, I think, ever produced for Battletech back in the day. I wish there were more books like this that had been written. And I still hold out hope that Catalyst nowadays can and will look back, or hopefully we'll see this video and maybe be interested in going back to some of these battles, or just creating some that happened in different periods and just making books like this again, because they're really, really good. The Galtor campaign is probably one of my favourites for a few different reasons. The first is it feels like a very intimate affair between the two. you get a full listing of both sides' order of battle. You get an idea of the commanders. You have a relatively small area of the battle. It's on an entire continent, but you're not doing the whole world. You've got a couple of cities. You've got like the mountain pass below, and the different areas of the fight that go there. And you have an interesting narrative here as well, or a couple. You've got the fake Star League depot and the fact that it turns out there's a real Star League depot on the planet, combined with the fact that you've also got the different generals who are bickering within the Kuritan side of things, which is aping the real world history of Imperial Japan, when their officers would regularly have little spats, which ended up playing into the Allies' hands. Also with the fact that you've got some of the Davion commanders who are kind of aloof and don't really want to, follow orders or really take the advice that's given to them by the likes of Sheridan Douglas, for instance. And yeah, you've just got some really nasty battles in there as well. You hear about things like the Lone Wolves mercenaries, for instance, are just instant like heroes for me. Like big booty Stetson and stuff like that. Guys just going around just like hatchet with a hatchet man, just chopping the cockpits of Kuritan mechs and like pulling bits off them to as basically his loot and stuff like that. Just there's some great visuals in there. The Davion commander who tries to fire his AC on his Centurion, it basically explodes and sends his mech flying backwards into a ditch. The eerie disappearance of one of the Davion forces on the coastal area. Because you could just imagine, like in the middle of the smoke, there's just this fight that erupts. No one knows what's going on, and by the time other Davion forces get out there, everyone's dead. There's just no signals were sent out. Nothing. No one knows exactly what happened to those people. They all just got wiped out, and it's really like some of it's really sinister. It's cold, and it's just like any real battle in that respect, and it's really good. If you're into the reading up on some of these things, definitely worth picking up a PDF. And note though, if you do get the PDF version, that's on websites like DriveThruRPG, you'll find that there's a lot of odd, like white blank parts of images, and that's because a lot of the unseen material has still been stripped out of this, and it's highly unlikely that they're ever going to go back to this book and add in any of the new artwork. So unfortunately, unless you can find a friend who's got a copy, let's say, online that has the original artwork, you're going to be missing out on a lot of some of the classic images here that I've managed to clip out. And one of the problems with this is that because it's you can see sometimes there's text from the other side of the page in there, which I try my best to get rid of on some, but others it's kind of impossible, unfortunately. But it's the best shot we've got. The other cool thing that I really like about this book is that you get the small maps that give you an idea of just what happened, what units went where, moved where, attacked where, that kind of thing. That's really nice. And overall, yeah, it's Galtor's just a really, really good book, but I'm not finished with it. I am going to do another part after this, which is literally talking about each force that's in the book at the back, because they have a section for it's called Battle Force Notations, because one part of the book actually has a number of the battles that you can replay on the table, and they have complete breakdowns of all of the forces involved using a like an acronym system. And these battles could get very large very quickly, and you would have to have a fair number of models to redo some of these battles, because they are vast for some of them. But after this, there'll be another part where it has like a breakdown, say, of the Draconis March, Dahar Draconis March Militia is the first one. It gives you the commander, their mission, their strength, their fighting rating, the number of losses they would ultimately suffer, how many points they were valued at, and then a complete breakdown of basically, as I said, what I'll have to do is I'll have to have, or you may have to have like a separate image up that shows the legend for all the units and what each like letter and number denote, and then you get an idea of just what kind of equipment they have. So yeah, Galtor Campaign, it's really good, and as I said, I'm sad in a way that it's done, because there won't be any other books like this to really draw from. that have this kind of writing, because there are some clan invasion stuff. You got like Twycross and Coventry and Luthien and stuff. I'll probably get round to them in the future for campaign videos, but they just don't have the same kind of feeling, because I'm pretty sure they didn't do any other source books that were like this. They didn't do like Steiner versus Marek, or Lau versus Davion, or Kurita versus Steiner, or Marek versus Lau. They didn't do anything like that, so this is sort of a one-off in a way, and it sucks, because if they'd done like a series of these kind of books, it would have been brilliant. But yeah, I'm still getting over this cold, so sorry if I'm a little huskier than I am in previous parts. That might be a bit detracting for someone who might be listening to this in the one after the other. I do apologise, but I'll try and rest up completely for that. And if not, I may just be stuck with a huskier voice. Oh no, what a pity, never mind. But hey, have a good one all. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye.